And all the state governments were persuaded to start what is popularly known as renewable energy development agencies. And they did, because the money was coming from the union government. But have they been able to deliver the results? So the first major challenge is get the union government to recognize renewable as an option, a viable option that will supplement and complement the conventional power. The second major challenge comes into getting the state governments to cooperate and coordinate installation of renewable power generating systems in the country. And the third major challenge is with regard to regulation. I mean, the entire renewable energy sector is also being governed by the Indian Electricity Act. We do not have a separate Renewable Energy Act. I hope that will be in place soon. And this renewable energy law, if it comes to it, instead of creating yet another regulator, probably would expect the Electricity Regulatory Commissions to implement it. It is not, regulators at the state level, regulators at the central level. They have adopted different strategies, different approaches, and how they deal with it differ widely from state to state. In India, we always have an example that most of the regulators in India happen to be former civil servants. And former civil servants who were said to be, or who were accused to be extremely compliant to the politicians while they serve the government, suddenly develop a certain amount of backbones. And they begin prescribing law instead of interpreting law. This is yet another problem that we have. I mean, no aspersion on the regulators present here or the former regulators, but there are regulators who try to put laws in place instead of just interpreting the act and have the regulations in place. I came across an interesting example recently about one particular state regulatory commission which prescribed regulatory portfolio standards. And when the utilities did not comply with them, they imposed a penalty. And the utilities went up and said that, look, the crime is described in the Act, but the punishment for the crime has not been prescribed in the Act. So we cannot be punished for a crime that you call it to be so. I mean, this is yet another problem. I mean, it's all legal nuances that we are playing around with. And we have multiple regulations also. When it comes to renewable power that's grid connected, whether we can take it across the state, probably we have to approach the Central Electricity Regulatory Commission to have a separate set of guidelines. And we talked about nuclear power at length. And TED seems to be having the latest figure of 20,000 megawatts by 2022. But till about 15 days ago, it was 20,000 megawatts by 2020. And I don't know when this got shifted by 2 years, because we are very fond of this 2020, thanks to the weekend. But we said 20,000 megawatts of nuclear by 2020, renewable by 2020, and major portion, where will it come from? We thought of getting it done for solar. And to get the government to recognize, shift them from the functional fixation of getting power from conventional coal-based thermal sources to renewables was a difficult task. But now we have the Prime Minister's Action Plan for Climate Change, in which they are talking about a solar mission and increasing the solar power generation, all those things. But one has to read the text in the context within which it's been developed. The context is the climate change problem. It is not sudden love for renewables, but thanks to climate change negotiation, let's talk about it. And I hope this articulation turns into implementation and further on to achievement. In which case, I think with India's resources being what they are, both solar and wind together can well exceed 20,000 megawatts by 2020. I mean, there have been some interesting news recently that they have worked out a viable model of promoting solar generation. But the problems, the challenges again there. Conventionally, the independent power producers in the wind sector have not been able to sign PPAs for more than 10 years. Now we have to talk about having power purchase agreements for 25 years. I mean, this is something that we have to get the utilities to agree. And again, the assurance of payment. How exactly are we going to work out the system? Is it through escrow account? Is it through some other mechanism by which people will be able to get their promised tariff? And invariably, when it comes to the utilities taking the power, I mean, naturally, if it's in a remote area, the solar power has to be evacuated by having a dedicated transmission line. When it comes to it, the invariable argument is if solar power, I mean, capacity utilization factor is going to be only around 20-25%, my entire investment is going to be utilized only for 20-25% of the time. So why should we invest such a large amount in transmission? Just because someone is in love with solar, it does not mean I have to spend extra money to lay the transmission networks. But while encouraging solar generation or the wind generation, do we simultaneously look at the issue of transmission networks? And are we going to dedicate them only for the renewable power, or we are going to combine some other power to be evacuated by the same transmission lines? These are all major issues that we need to address. The other argument which comes invariably in renewable power, especially more so in wind, I think Chintan would be covering it, having worked in the wind sector, is the problem of scheduling and predictability. I mean, are we able to predict wind power generation? I mean, there are efforts on to have a modeling at least for a day-ahead basis. I mean, I was in a meeting in Gujarat state when they went hammer and tongs at the wind power generators, stating that it's entirely unpredictable, we don't want to take their power, we cannot schedule them. But ultimately, 2 weeks later, we found when a few wind machines wanted to shut down for maintenance, the same utility turned around and said, you can't close them down now. We need their power. I mean, ultimately, if you really look at these things, they are more commercial and financial issues rather than technical issues. But many of these financial and commercial issues take the form of technical objections to, I mean, not to take renewable. The other thing is somehow we still haven't looked at, I mean, when we talk about wind power, we are talking about wind power, solar, wind, solar. Can we have hybrid systems? I mean, there's a massive program Mr. Razdan has left on the decentralized distributed generation. Can we have a decentralized distributed generation system? Let there be, if necessary, a part conventional power, but major portion of that can be generated through renewables. And the most important point in more important in solar is the question of efficiencies. The solar PV panel efficiencies have stagnated at the same level for years together. We occasionally hear about efficiencies having increased from 14-15% to 22% recently. I read a news item, they talk about 42% efficiency of solar panels. If you really